We're going to enter into our first case study of today. We have a series of really cool case studies looking at WWE, Formula One, PGA, a lot of the big names out there. And Doug Price from Avid is going to introduce our first, which will be WWE. Doug?
Awesome. Thanks, guys. So disaster recovery. What is it? Why do you want it? And how do you do it? That's usually a question we get at Avid quite a bit. And unfortunately, not everybody knows how to do it or has the budget to do it. So there's three things generally you need: budget, know-how, and a management or ownership that's willing to move in that direction. We are fortunate to have somebody who has all those three, Zack Riccobono from WWE, who was going to come up and talk to you a little bit about how we were able to assist, what they do, how they do it, and how it's working today. So, Zack?
Hello, everyone. I'm Zack Riccobono. I'm the Senior Director for Post-Production Engineering at WWE. Avid asked me to come here today to talk about disaster recovery planning and protecting your content and kind of the journey WWE's taken to get to the point where we're comfortable with our disaster recovery systems. My department at WWE is responsible for the design and maintenance of our all-network post-production and delivery systems. I've been with WWE for about 10 years, and in that time I've seen many iterations of system redundancy and content protection. When I started with WWE, we were doing deck-to-deck and linear editing, and our primary and backup copies were a Betacam or HD cam tape and another copy of that stored off-site somewhere. As we progressed to non-linear editing and our footage became digitized, we moved to LTO tape and kind of followed the same disaster strategy of one copy on-site in a robot, one copy off-site, secure somewhere that we could get to in a disaster. But in the last 3 to 5 years, our company's progressed rapidly, and our DR needs have progressed along with them. So, right now we have more content and shorter deadlines than ever, which means a bigger need for an efficient DR strategy. And that journey to get there is what I'll be talking about today. So as an overview, I'll give you the 5 key milestones we put in place for creating our disaster recovery systems. So the first one is defining what disaster recovery means for your organization. So every organization has different content protection and business continuity needs and guidelines to follow, and I'll share with you guys some of ours, how we got to our disaster recovery system. The second is designing a system to meet your company's needs. So this is where Avid played a huge role in assisting us in coming up with the systems that WWE has in place today that takes care of their defined disaster recovery. The third and probably most important is creating buy-in from all business units, because let's face it, what good is a disaster recovery system if you have no one to finance your operation? The fourth is implementing your DR systems, so basically creating a timeline and setting internal expectations for your DR. And the fifth is just documentation and training your staff, because what's a good DR system if no one knows how to cut over or activate it in a time of crisis? So to start off, I'll tell you a little bit more about WWE for those of you unfamiliar. Basically, we are in the business of content creation, production, and distribution facility located in Stamford, Connecticut. We have about 40 plus hours of original content produced out of our facility every week. That includes 2 weekly episodic shows, a lot of promotional content, and original content for our network, whether that be series content or one-off specials. We have about 100,000 hours, probably getting closer to 200,000 hours at this point of archive content. And for us, archive content is crucial to our business. Because we're in the business of storytelling, the content from 10 minutes ago or 10 years ago could be needed at any moment. So because of this, our archive is important to protect. We have a live event about 2 to 3 times a week, which adds to a lot of our content and gives us a little bit more of geographic diversity for DR as well. And the final thing is we have a network app with a 24/7 stream and about, I don't know the exact number at this point, but thousands of hours of VOD content. So we'll start with defining disaster recovery. So the first thing we took into consideration are disaster scenarios. So the first one we thought of is hardware or software failures. So say a server goes down or a localized outage. We can attack that like a normal way that everyone would do with high availability servers, multi-purpose servers, servers that can take over for one another in the event of a failure. The second is a data center outage. So we're talking about you've lost a rack in your data center, you've lost a row in your data center, or God forbid you've lost your entire data center. And how do you account for this? And do we need to account for this? And the third is a site outage. So now our entire facility is down, or there's been some kind of localized disaster, and how do we get to our content? So we asked production, which one does these need to be concerned of? And of course we got the answer, which is all of them. So next thing to take into consideration for disaster recovery was our business needs. So the first thing we're concerned about was content protection. So as I mentioned before, we're already backing up content to primary and duplicate LTO tape with nearline storage to support our more recent content. So the question was, do we need more than that? Is that sufficient? Where do we go? The second is business continuity planning. Basically, what production operations were expected to continue in the event of a major disaster. And the third, and probably most important in any disaster planning, is RPO and RTO. So recovery point or recovery time objectives. Basically, how much content are you okay with losing in a disaster scenario, and how much time are you okay with it taking to get back up and running at full production speed? So we asked this to production, and we got the answer that we dreaded. Well, we want everything, and we need it back and working immediately. Who would have thought? So the question is, how do we make sure that all this content is available and can be edited in the event that our facility no longer exists or is in some sort of partial existence? So now we're on to designing the right system. We know our needs. How do we go about designing it, right? So the first thing we had to look at was, what are our challenges in designing a system? So the first thing is, we have extremely large data sets at WWE. So we record and edit in DNX 145, which is a high bitrate codec. And our average show, our live event, is anywhere from 3 to 7 hours, depending on how long they feel like running, it seems, these days. And at any one of those, you can have about up to 10 ISO cameras. So imagine now 10 cameras times 7 hours of footage times every week times twice a week. You're amassing a large amount of data quickly. So you can I think you could hit a couple more of these here. The next thing is high server count. So to accommodate our Avid framework, we have about 50 or so servers that we need to figure out how to duplicate in a DR scenario to give our production the full pipeline that they have in a normal operating environment. And the last thing is access for the production staff. So production needs to be able to get to an edit station, access our content, edit with it, and get it out the door to meet contractual obligations and to meet our timelines. So we have 16 crates of ISIS storage, same as the production facility. We have a full complement of interplay servers, but the difference at DR is that they've been virtualized on Cisco UCS hardware. So virtualization was a huge part of DR for us. It allows us to be a little bit more agile with our servers and perhaps use the virtual infrastructure for other things. And it also allows us to fit in a smaller footprint that we're working with at DR. So at our main site, we have an entire data center to accommodate Avid and its servers. At DR, we're limited to a few racks in a colo facility that we have to make the best use of our space. So Avid's ability to support virtualization now and to go out of the way to certify Cisco UCS for us was really a key factor in planning our DR. The dark fiber line that you saw in that drawing, we've gone with a 40 gigabit diverse dark fiber path out of our facility to our colo facility, which basically allows for seamless sync and access to our content no matter what site you're at. And the network there basically can function as a part of our main network infrastructure, or in the event that we lose our entire facility, it can operate independently as a standalone site. So the next slide here is basically the first iteration ever of what WWE DR might look like. All we had at this point was a blank room and a couple of bare racks. So what you're looking at here, you can go to the next slide, is about 900 square feet of leased colo space at Encompass Digital Media. We planned for about having 10 to 15 workstations at this site, which we were told could support bare bones production and kind of meet our contractual obligations. Along with that, in the data center is a complete replica, as I mentioned, of our Avid production servers, which are virtualized, and a complete replica of our production storage. So additional benefits to being in the Encompass facility is that our network origination is out of Encompass. So if we ever do need to get files to our own network in the event of a disaster, we're in the same building. We can get back and forth with them quickly. Also, they have the uplink and downlink capabilities as well as ingest and play out to get into our systems in the event of a disaster. You can go to the next one. So basically, what this boils down to is we have an active-passive DR configuration. So our content is replicated to our DR storage as soon as it's written to our production storage, allowing for no lost content, which, as you remember, was one of the main requirements of production. This is accomplished with basically robocopy scripts that were written for us by Avid Engineering that are running on just a couple of basic Avid file servers. This part took the longest, I think, to configure for a DR because it took a lot of tweaking of what scripts were going to copy what data and to streamline the process so it took as little amount of time as possible with the smallest amount of failures. So as you can imagine, that took a lot of streamlining, but we got there. And then the second part is our interplay database because we're nothing without our database. It's just a bunch of files on disk. So every night we have an interplay backup that happens. It's pushed over to our DR site and automatically restored on the DR system, leaving it ready to go in the morning basically for anyone who comes in. We could cut over to DR at any moment and be up kind of instantaneously. And the last piece of it is a product called Production Selector. So we use this software on all of our edit workstations to direct them to either our DR or main system. So I think we're at the point where it's great. You've got a great system, you've tested it, it works, but what good is it if you can't get the buy-in, right? So the next part is creating buy-in. So first we tried to sell this DR as an insurance policy, something in layman's terms everyone understands, right? Something you want to pay for as a backup, but you hope you never have to use it. Well, finance wasn't thrilled about this. There was some hesitation because the large price tag, as Doug mentioned, associated with DR, and that basically for equipment that was going to be sitting idle all the time and just depreciating without even being touched. So we said, okay, let's pivot a bit. Let's talk about leveraging the loss of potential revenue in a disaster. We have all these contracts to meet. We need to be up as soon as possible. And they said, okay, I like this idea a little bit better, but the loss of revenue is still hypothetical in a sense that some of these contracts are flexible. We'd be able to get some content out the door, not others. So any number you're really putting together isn't an exact science. So finally, and I think this kind of crossed the threshold for us, is we tried to leverage the DR site as a value add to daily business operations, which is something finance really got buy-in on. We showed that we can use this space on a daily basis and enhance daily business operations and use it as that. So let's go back. We'll stay on this slide. Let's go back to the space planning picture from earlier. So originally this was our DR space, but now we said, well, what if it's additional edit stations, right? We went to production and said, you could put 10 editors over there. They can edit back across the fiber to our main storage. And they said, well, that sounds great. Here's the problem. Our production needs to be right next to each other because they need to talk to each other, they need to interact, they need to get things out the door, and having someone in a different site is not a good idea. You can go to the next slide. So we said, okay, fine. What about space for our research and library department, right? And they kind of said the same thing. Well, we rely on our library department a lot to tell us when, where the footage I need is, how to get it, how do I get it quickly. I guess we're operating in a time without telephones or email. But we conform to what production needs. So the last thing we came up with is, okay, what if we make it a logging station for our WWE network loggers? We have thousands of hours of content on our network. All of it needs to be logged for milestones and such. And they said, okay, this could work. Our loggers don't really need to be next to production all the time. And now I kind of seen you've given 3 use cases for this space, and I'm sure there's infinitely more. So I think we're at the point now where we got the buy-in and we're going to move forward. So the last step is implementing the system, right? So after getting, here you can give it a click or so. So after getting all the gear tested and configured, after a few months of working with Avid Engineering, we were ready to test. So engineering went through and cut over a couple of workstations manually, tested, okay, great, it works with 1 or 2 workstations, this is great. We got to the point, okay, it's time for a full cutover test. So a few months ago, we coordinated and executed our first successful complete facility DR cutover. So with 100% success, we were able to cut over all workstations from the main system to the DR system and run off our Avid DR system for an extended period of time with all of our workstations running. So basically showing we're no longer susceptible to individual hardware, localized, or any kind of building disaster. So, okay, great. We're on the DR system. Everything's working. But here's the big question. So how do we fail back? So in a DR scenario, we've made a couple of assumptions. One, we're working on DR, so there's probably been a major system failure at our main site, or there's some kind of disaster locally. In either one of those cases, I think what we came to the agreement on is that our data on our production storage is now unreliable, which is fine because our DR site can function independently. So our DR site becomes our main site, we rebuild our main site, we build a new site somewhere else, and then all the scripts that we've written can be flipped and write from our DR site outward to a new site. So that's pretty much it for our DR system, but what I do want to talk about is the future of DR at WWE. So things we're already thinking about, even though it's only been several months since we've been completely vetted, is that, is it time to include more of the production functions in the pipeline? You saw some of that distribution, you saw some of that acquisition. While we can accommodate some of that, I don't know that we can accommodate the full load that we're used to achieving. The other thing we're looking at is multi-site DR. We have a property in Orlando, Florida called Performance Center. It's kind of our minor league operation for WWE. We've considered putting some systems down there. It gives us a little bit more geographical diversity, although we all know Florida is known for its hurricanes. So I'm not sure that's the best place either. Also, we need to spin up a fairly large data circuit to be editing across the line down there. Another thing that's going to help us in the future is virtualization of our production site. So as I mentioned, DR is virtualized. In the next couple of months, we will be virtualizing our entire production facility, which will help us instead of having disparate servers at DR, we could just have a backup copy of our production servers at the ready anytime we need to spin them up in really any location that has virtual infrastructure. So I'm sure some of you have been wondering this the whole time. I'm talking about everyone needs content. They need it everywhere. They need all the content. Why hasn't he brought up cloud? And the answer is we have thought about cloud, but we found that it just doesn't work for us. Avid actually has a great cloud solution. We've tried it out. It works fantastically for shorter form content than WWE. Our shows are 3 hours long. They're multi-track video. They're graphic intensive. They're audio intensive. And with that, just the bandwidth up and down to the cloud, just a non-starter for us, really. So while we continue to explore those options, we're really not there yet as a company. So that's where we are with that. And as Avid moves forward with their new Media Central offerings and the new Nexus storage, which will allow us to grow our storage a little bit, kind of in the same footprint or a footprint maybe half the size, that's also going to really help our DR initiative. So basically, in summary, I think what we talked about was we defined the meaning of DR for WWE. It was pretty specific and pointed. We designed a system based on our needs with the help of Avid. We created buy-in for our company, which was a bit of a hassle, but we got there. We implemented all these systems, tested them aggressively to the point where we felt 100% comfortable saying to my boss that we were okay. And we continue to explore ways to protect our content and protect the production pipeline. We're always evolving as a company, so we know our DR site needs to be evolving as well. And I think that's where we are today, and we're comfortable with it. But we're looking forward to growing our DR and growing the company. That's about it.